Ah, what a beautiful day. So that's where all my missed Lux ults are going. Hello everyone, my name is Borax, and I've been on a mission to play and rate every single champion in the support role. Today we'll be looking at Lux. I know, it's not off meta, but hey, every champion means every champion. But the reasons she works as a support include a passive which enhances her poke, a long range 2-man snare on her Q, an AoE shield on her W, AoE poke and slow on her E, and then she has her ultimate, a fun long range support tool. Even though she's clearly viable, how strong is she actually? Well, let's find out together as I rate Lux, the Lady of Luminosity, on her ability to be played in the support role. Invading, or better known as flipping the entire game level 1. Unless the enemy is playing a hook champion, then Lux is strong at invading if you're willing to start Q, and she deserves a S rating. The fact that you can root multiple enemies from a relatively safe distance is very powerful, and many people won't expect it. Now let's talk about laning, where I like to judge a champion based on 3 categories: poking, peeling, and all-inning. The main reason why you don't want to start Q though is because you'd rather have E level 1, as the ability is so oppressive early. Throw out this big round ability towards the enemies, activate it to get that slow, securing you a comet proc, and if you are feeling cheeky, weave in an auto attack to proc your passive, and just like that the enemy is already miserable. Once Lux reaches level 2, you now have access to your long range CC ability that when landed lets you get a free auto proc off, and an easy chance to throw a quick E and another cheeky auto off to instantly win lane. It's often a better idea though to try and first land an E, as the slow will make landing your Q a lot easier. For poking, I will give Lux a S+, and it could honestly be a S++, but my boss says I can't give those out as they wouldn't fit in the box. Lux E is the single most annoying poke spell in the bot lane, as it does decent damage when max first, and is quite easy to land. Even if you don't land it, you can just leave it there and create a zone where the enemies just can't walk. Constantly, you'll be forcing people to play under their tower with low health, and if you have access to your ultimate, well, the next time you land a Q, say hello to a free kill. The downside of being absolutely dominant in the poke category though, usually means that the enemies will be spam begging for a gank, which is when you have to try and peel instead. The lame thing about the truly meta supports is that they are actually good at many of these categories. If the enemies are trying to make a play, you can throw out your E to slow them and then root them with a Q, and just like that the play is usually over. In an elongated fight, you also have your W, which will give an initial shield, and then another one on the way back to everyone that it hits. And while the shield is actually pretty mediocre, the strength is in the fact that it's AoE and affects yourself. For peeling, I will give Lux an A rating, as there are 2 major disadvantages. The first being the fact that your Q root is by no means guaranteed, so if you miss the ability as the enemy is engaging, there's a good chance you will just wind up dead, so you do have to be very careful with this ability. If the enemy is looking a bit frisky, you might not want to use Q to poke, but rather save it to prevent plays from happening. The second problem with Lux's ability to peel is the existence of flash. You will be wanting to use your range advantage to reduce the eagerness of the enemy to engage, but if they flash on top of you, Lux is so squishy that there's a lot of risk of being blown up, so you do have to play a bit safe. But if you can play safe, you can absolutely dominate a matchup and all-in enemies from 100 to 0 quite frequently. Oh hey Nami, yeah sorry, I hit my Q ability so you don't get to exist anymore. Lux's full damage combo is insane on squishy targets, and a major reason why people complain about this champion a lot. If you've been poking people enough, there will be plenty of opportunities for you to hit a fast Q ult under tower for kills. But in the early game, for some reason, people think they can scrap with you and win, but like the Swain found out, you can't disrespect a Lux lane like that. I've also been a strong advocate for the level 2 power spike, and as Lux you want to be helping your ADC hit those minions so that you can get it. The amount of damage you produce with Q and E versus someone who is level 1 is just devastating. Then you also have decent gank setup with a flash Q engage, as most enemies won't expect something so aggressive, but that will oftentimes be enough CC for your team to do the rest to get the kill. For all inning, I will give Lux a S-. It relies on you hitting that Q, which can be quite difficult if the enemy is skilled. But more often than not, they will just end up juking into it, and once you get a hang of hitting it, you will be very satisfied with how much kill pressure this champion has. Now that we've talked about Lux's laning prowess, let's rate the matchups that she might have to face. If you follow this channel, then you know that I disdain Morgana and would say that she is the League of Legends equivalent of having Dinkelberg as your neighbor. Morgana actually isn't that bad of a matchup, and she'll be showing up later in this list, but I'll still shout her out. The two hardest matchups are Blitzcrank and Nautilus, as if they hook you or your ADC, they do have a good chance of just one-shotting that target, but I will say, if the hook champion sucks, you can still beat him, but it is very risky overall. The other lanes that are quite scary include Thresh and Pyke. They aren't as dangerous, as they have a bit less range and kill threat in general if you space properly. Leona also belongs here, because you can poke her a lot, but if she lands her E on someone, it's going to be rough. Then Lux has a bunch of skill matchups, and this is where Morgana belongs. You should be able to land your abilities more frequently than she can, but if she does get her ulti or Q on you, that can be quite scary. Then there are some pokey champions in Xerath, Vel'Koz, and Zyra, and it will just come down to who can hit more skill shots. Senna, Yuumi, and Soraka are pretty uniquely situated, where they can sit back and heal a lot of the poke you do, and they scale rather well. Then we have a bunch of champions that Lux does quite well into, and she can get a lot of her poke off in advantageous situations, but if you do misstep, there is potential that they can kill you. Finally, Lux has a bunch of champions that she can truly dominate. As an Alistar player, I remember quite well that as long as the Lux isn't stupid, she can bully you so hard without you being able to do anything in return unless you use your flash. Then I think Lux is an amazing answer into a lot of these shield squishy supports, as she outranges them, and if she gets a full combo off, she can one-shot them in the late game. Finally, we have a bunch of champions in the who plays these guys even tier, as I haven't seen them in so long. I actually saw someone hover Rel recently, and I got excited, but then they ended up playing Lux instead themselves. Now let's talk about ADCs that you want to pair Lux with, and there are some good combos out there, but by far the best one is Caitlyn. It's so good that if your ADC doesn't pick it when you are choosing to play Lux or vice versa, it is a real wasted opportunity. The amount of range advantage you have and the super easy trap setup will lead you to getting a ton of tower plates and usually first tower. I think other lane dominant champions are also good with Lux, like an Ashe or a Misfortune, and you want to stay away from those hyper carries like Kog'Maw or Vayne, as you can't do much to protect them. In the hypothetical case that your ADC is a useless bonobo, then you might want to consider roaming from time to time, so let's talk about that. Now I love roaming a ton, but as Lux you actually want to try and play around lane usually, because then you can keep the enemies trapped underneath their tower and force them to stay in awkward situations in order to get CS. But sometimes you are dominating your opponents so heavily that after you get a kill in the bot lane, you can choose not to back and instead go to mid lane, where if you do hit your Q ability, it's almost always going to end up being a kill, especially if you have your ultimate up. For roaming, I will give Lux a S-. She can do it rather effectively as she has good CC and amazing range, but you do run the risk of getting caught out and dying on your own, as you are very squishy. Let's give Lux a rating for her ability to support in the early game, which will slot at a S. She is one of the best champions out there in the support role, and one of the few that I see real carry potential on. The only reason I don't give her a S+ is because her only form of hard CC, her Q, isn't a freebie to land, and if you are behind, you are super duper squishy and can be punished quite easily and frequently. I think the S+ supports are the ones who are useful if they are super fed or if they are super behind, and I think Lux does need a bit of a lead to really shine, but if she does have that lead, she can easily take over in the
Together for Demacia!
In the late game, responsibilities of a support I like to rate include their ability to get picks and to teamfight. Getting picks as Lux support is so strong for multiple reasons. Hide in a bush, throw out your Q, and if it connects, you can slam your E and ulti on top of them quickly to do a massive amount of damage. And yes, the highest first combo is using Q, then autoing it to proc your passive, and then using your E, and then activating your E, which will grant the enemy another passive tick, which you can then proc by using your ultimate. Now, I'm gonna be honest, this combo is massive and isn't the hardest to pull off, but it does require you being kinda close to the enemy for it to actually be feasible, and oftentimes you will do enough damage just with Q, E, and ult, but I still felt the need to mention it before my comments get flooded by Lux players who are obsessed with this combo. I mean, more often than not, all you actually need is your ultimate to get that pick off, and its long range makes you a threat from all over the map and makes me confident in giving Lux a S+ for her ability to get picks in the late game. Now let's talk about teamfighting, where support's responsibilities include engaging, peeling, and sometimes dealing damage. Lux is much more of a pick champion than an engage champion, as in a straight up teamfight, people should be able to dodge your Q unless they are bad at the video game, which thankfully many of my opponents are. She's great at following up other CC or targeting opponents who use a TP, as then your hard CC is easy to land. For engaging, I will give Lux a S-. Flash Q is not a bad way to engage, but throwing out random Qs usually won't be the play, and you want to be more of a follow-up to others engage than the main engage for your team. You know, there is a special Lux build where you can go Glacial Augment, Moonstone Renewer, and Shield Max, and just like that, you take a really potent damage threat and turn them into a very mediocre CC champion with shields. Yes, I might sound harsh, but I truly think this playstyle is such a waste of Lux's potential, as you might as well play an actual peeler. But if you are doing it because you really like Lux and think it's fun, then I do agree with you, in that regard it isn't bad. But what about damage poke Lux? Is she good at peeling? Yeah, she isn't bad if you can hit that Q or slow on someone, but if they dodge it or have some sort of gap closer, then your W shield doesn't give you enough HP to help you survive against most people. For peeling, I will give Lux Support an A+. Yes, if you hit the craziest Qs, you will be the one killing people instead of getting killed, but you have no great answer to a hyper carry or champions with tons of mobility, and you need to worry a lot about not getting killed yourself, as you are so squishy and not mobile. Finally, it's time to talk about Lux's ability to deal damage as a support, and she deserves a S++ here. Crazy range, crazy AoE, relatively low cooldowns, and a nice build with lots of pen means that you'll be chunking out enemy squishies and making their life miserable. I think she's the best damage support out there outside of maybe a Brand, and should be your go-to pick if you are frustrated with trying to wait for your team to carry you, and you want to be the major threat that the enemy team has to be scared of. Before we look at Lux's overall ability to support, let's take a look at the runes and items that I would recommend. I think there are 3 rune options. The first is Guardian, which should only be taken at super high elo or pro play because it's signaling to your ADC, which should be a Caitlyn, that you have full faith that they can carry the game with their damage, and all you are here to do is enable them to do that. The second suboptimal rune option is Glacial Augment, as you can proc it easily with your Q, and it does get stronger with a Moonstone build, but you don't really need more peel or slows if you can land your Q already, so I think it's a little excessive, but it is funny to see all the lasers. The best rune option by far is Common, as it turns your lane poke from good to great, and will be further useful in the late game when you are poking enemies. For the rest of the tree, I like to take Mana Flow Band, Transcendence, and Scorch. Then, secondarily, I took Perfect Timing, as I am a sucker for Zhonya's, but I think you could swap it out for Time Warp Tonic. I do think Biscuit Delivery is great though if you are playing an aggressive lane, and the mana it grants you is super useful. Now let's talk about items. For your gold income item, you should almost always take Spell Thief's Edge. If you for some reason think you are in a situation that you need Relic Shield as you have to play safe, then that means something went wrong in draft. Then you want to go for your boots, and I think Sork Shoes are the best option in order to maximize the amount of damage you can do to squishy opponents. But if the enemy has a fair amount of tanky people, then I actually prefer Ionian Boots of Lucidity, as being more utility centric will be better for your team. Then I would work on a Mythic, and while it is expensive, if you are ahead, Luden's Echo was my favorite option to further increase the amount of pen I had, and it really turns Lux into that one-shot support that people complain about all the time. If you are more even, or if the enemies are focusing you a lot, then Crown of the Shattered Queen is super solid, as will help prevent you from getting one-shot, and you can keep it up quite often as you can play from several screens away with your range advantage. I honestly think that Medjai's is a great option on Lux, but it is very feast or famine. If you are good at being aware of your surroundings and playing safe, you can pick up free stacks so easily, and it is the cheapest legendary, meaning you get more use out of your Mythic passive quickly. Another great option I went for if I wanted more safety was Zhonya's, as it helps you stall for your team to come help you if you get caught out, or you can use it to prevent yourself from getting one shot, which is extra nice if you have that Medjai's. Now most games you won't have more gold, but if the game does continue, then I'd recommend either going for a Morello's if the enemy team has a lot of healing, or a Horizon Focus if you really want to double down on that one-shot potential. Now that we've talked about the runes and items, let's give Lux an overall rating for her ability to support, which will slot at a S+. I think she's actually stronger outside of the early game, which might be surprising because she can dominate many lanes, but in the late game you can hide behind your teammates and have a big impact in fights and plays around the map as long as you watch the minimap. The potential to turn a 2v1 into a completely won fight because of your ultimate is insane in this support role. And while yes, your Q is difficult to hit, hopefully in the late game the rest of your team can do a bit of work, as Lux is more of a follow-up support than a I will be the reason we either lose or win this game support. Which is in my opinion the reason why people hate having Lux on their team as a support, as they would much rather have that Leona or Nautilus. They could be happy that they are engaging properly, or they can yell at them for inting the game away, which makes them feel good, as that means they have an excuse for losing the game, as it could never be their own poor play. Would I recommend you play Lux Support? Definitely. Want to do a lot of damage and carry some games? Lux Support is a top tier pick at doing that. When should you pick it? Pick it in lanes where the enemy has very limited kill pressure, as if they can't get on top of you, then you have free reign to make their lives a living nightmare as you throw your spells at them to poke them down to oblivion. You also would prefer that the enemies have some squishies that you'll be easily able to pick off with your combo, and you would like it if your team has some sort of champions that can help you peel and engage, as Lux can struggle in those areas if she's the only one who is expected to do so. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and would leave it a like, that would be amazing, and if you'd consider subscribing, that would make my day. Again, thanks for watching, and I want to wish you good luck and have fun if you're playing Lux Support. You will probably need it.